Oscar Dirlewanger is a name that still evokes horror, even among those familiar with the darkest chapters of World War II. As the commander of a battalion notorious for its atrocities in occupied territories, he turned murder, violence, and torture into a daily routine. However, Dirlewanger's cruelty and that of his subordinates went beyond war crimes. It was so extreme that even his fellow Nazis were shocked. Dirlewanger was one of the few Nazi commanders whose methods disgusted other SS members. His own comrades called him a bloodthirsty butcher, and his unit was likened to a gang of robbers and rapists. Oscar Dirlewanger personally participated in torture and executions. He not only gave orders but often took sadistic pleasure in them. Dirlewanger hosted parties where he forced captive girls to strip, dance, and then killed them, taking delight in their suffering. This is just a glimpse into the long list of this man's crimes, which you'll learn about in this video. What kind of person could lead one of the most inhuman punitive squads in history? Dirlewanger's actions were not only tolerated, but encouraged at the highest levels. This is not just a story of cruelty, it's a story of absolute darkness in the human soul, where murder became entertainment and violence was a tool of terror. During the Third Reich, this darkness found a platform, allowing people like Dirlewanger, whom respected German officers and politicians would not have associated with in other times, to rise to power. The first meeting between Hitler and the then president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, is telling. Eyewitnesses said that Hindenburg looked at the Bavarian corporal with almost contempt, but such was the time that absolute nobodies became prominent politicians and military leaders overnight, with thousands of lives depending on their actions. One such figure in German history during the 1930s and 1940s was Oscar Dirlewanger. Born into a wealthy Swabian family, Dirlewanger was surprisingly quiet and calm as a child. His childhood and youth were unremarkable, similar to his peers from well-off families. Those who knew him personally would never have believed that this pious child, who obediently attended church, would become a monster. Things seemed to start well for Dirlewanger. Before entering university in 1913, he joined the army of Kaiser Wilhelm, served for a year, and was promoted to the rank of officer in 1914. That same year, the First World War began, and the future SS man actively participated, earning 2 Iron Crosses, the rank of lieutenant, and the position of company commander. However, during this time, Dirlewanger also discovered his penchant for looting. He quickly realized that robbing the civilian population during wartime was a common practice that went unpunished, so he fully embraced this opportunity. These skills served him well after the war. Dirlewanger participated in suppressing revolutionary movements in Germany between 1918 and 1919, where his punitive and sadistic tendencies first emerged. Over a relatively short period, Dirlewanger held various jobs, including tax advisor, factory manager, and bank employee, but he consistently found himself in situations involving bribery and theft. It's remarkable that he managed to avoid prison, facing only dismissals. Meanwhile, Oscar closely monitored the political situation in the country. He was a member of the Reich Party, participated in suppressing communist masses, and witnessed the internal strengthening of ultra-Nazi ideology. He particularly despised Jews, sensing that a time of great change was approaching. Oscar understood the need to have some credentials to offer when the time came. After about 2 years, he was expelled from the commercial school, again for anti-Semitism. However, he miraculously managed to graduate from the University of Frankfurt am Main and even obtained a doctoral degree. Simultaneously, he tried to join the growing ranks of the SS, but without success. Dirlewanger knew how to wait, and in 1933, when the party officially came to power, he secured a position as a department head. It was a small but significant authority that began to reveal his true character. True to form, Oscar managed to get involved in various scandals involving bribery, theft, and frequent abuse of office. His progress in other aspects was also evident, as he suddenly discovered a passion for debauchery with minors and enjoyed entertaining himself with 30-year-old women. This time, he couldn't wriggle out of trouble as easily. When caught red-handed as a pedophile, he was expelled from the party, stripped of all previously awarded titles and honors, and even imprisoned. This was a severe blow. However, thanks to his connections and friendships with the right people, the libertine was released from prison just 2 years later and sent to fight in Spain for General Franco as part of the Condor Legion. In Spain, he once again distinguished himself, and upon his return in 1939, Dirlewanger was reinstated into the Nazi Party and the SS, receiving the rank of Untersturmführer. From this moment on, the story of the most brutal punitive unit begins. The SS, despite its official respectability, was a gathering of criminals, poachers, and sadists. They were guided by the formula, cadres decide everything, so they kept Oscar close, knowing he could be useful. Soon he had the opportunity to show his true colors as preparations for war demanded the mobilization of a vast number of people. The German command realized that all resources had to be utilized, leading to the creation of several penal battalions composed of convicts. Globoknik, the head of the SS main office and Himmler's deputy, convinced his boss of the need for a special penal unit within the SS. Dirlewanger was tasked with creating a team of criminals, primarily hunters convicted of poaching. However, over time, the team also included professional criminals and murderers. In 1940, the SS established a penal unit of 84 men, including criminals and sadists. Initially formed as an elite punitive group to suppress uprisings and fight partisans, the unit quickly became a gang due to a lack of discipline and its brutal treatment of anyone who crossed its path. Even by Nazi standards, known for their inhumane treatment of civilians, this group's actions were extreme. Dirlewanger, who had no regard for the laws of war, took command of the unit with great enthusiasm. Among the ranks of these criminals, he felt at home, creating one of the most ruthless and terrifying divisions of the war. Human feelings were foreign to Dirlewanger, hardened by years of personally committing numerous atrocities. He took pleasure in watching children and women being tortured, and he rejoiced in the burning of villages with their inhabitants. The scoundrels serving under him adored him because he didn't bind them to any moral principles, allowing all kinds of atrocities. The horrors committed by these Nazis are indescribable. Villages were burned to the ground, the population was exterminated, girls and women were raped, but for the Third Reich, these were victories. In 1942, Dirlewanger was promoted to Oberfuhrer and General Governor, and he spared no opponents. He also didn't spare his soldiers, knowing that the units would be constantly replenished due to the abundance of convicts in Germany. He mercilessly threw his soldiers at machine guns, even when victory was not proportional to the losses. However, for these marginal individuals who lived day by day, this was not considered a crime against them. The main thing was that he allowed them to kill and rob. The special punitive unit's primary tasks were to track down and destroy partisan groups or counteract larger partisan formations and conduct ruthless punitive actions, i.e., commit genocide against the population of occupied territories. The latter was something the punitive unit excelled at, although they also caused problems for the partisans. Dirlewanger's unit specialized in exterminating civilians in retaliation for supporting partisans, spreading an atmosphere of fear and terror in the occupied territories. Their approach to destroying entire villages and towns was particularly barbaric, killing people on the slightest suspicion of collaboration with the resistance. Essentially, every person in these territories was a potential victim, even if completely innocent. These actions were accompanied by mass torture to extract any information, followed by executions, regardless of whether the person was involved in partisan activities or not. Dirlewanger's unit first distinguished itself in Poland in 1940, where they guarded the perimeters of ghettos, escorted prisoners and arrested civilians to concentration camps, and honed their terrifying skills on the inmates of these camps. Dirlewanger's unit used concentration camp prisoners as training targets for their soldiers, subjecting them to brutal torture and execution so that the soldiers could refine their skills and become accustomed to violence. This became a kind of school for the unit's soldiers, where violence was routine. These practices were unofficially approved at the highest level, as it was believed that they contributed to the hardening of fighters. Dirlewanger's unit was also involved in fighting Polish insurgents, and one of its distinctive features was that they left no prisoners. They initially tortured captives and then killed them all. The unit's most barbaric actions were directed at captured partisans. Any encounter with partisans ended in a brutal massacre, with many prisoners subjected to horrific torture before execution. Sometimes to intimidate the population, Dirlewanger's unit conducted public executions, forcing local residents to watch the cruel slaughter of partisans. This was part of their terror psychology, aiming not only to physically destroy the enemy, but also to morally break the population. The chief of the police of the Lublin district, Globoknik, appreciated the unit's merits and sent laudatory telegrams to the Reich in the SS main office. Even some SS services and units considered Dirlewanger's unit bloodthirsty butchers, marauders, and robbers, which was true. The soldiers of this gang behaved like criminals, killing, raping, and robbing even without any reason. The commander turned a blind eye to the antics of his subordinates because he could match any of them in brutality. For example, Oskar Dirlewanger once organized a party for his subordinate officers and local SD and SS officers in his apartment. On his command, 10 Jewish girls were brought in, forced to undress, and made to dance to music while being whipped and insulted. When the host and guests grew tired of this entertainment, Dirlewanger personally killed all the girls by injecting them with strychnine. The entire company watched the girls' death throes with pleasure. This case became a symbol of the horrors that Dirlewanger and his subordinates indulged in, and such atrocities were not uncommon in the practices of the Special Punitive Unit, as numerous testimonies confirm. These entertainments were organized regularly, as if human lives had no value. Dirlewanger and his unit killed without the slightest hesitation, guided only by their instincts. Even among the Nazis, known for their cruelty, Dirlewanger stood out for his exceptional inhumanity and lack of moral boundaries. His reputation reached the highest echelons of the SS, but instead of punishment, he continued to receive promotions and awards, which only increased his sense of impunity. When the SS leadership began receiving numerous letters and complaints from Germans and even SS members about Dirlewanger's unit, focusing on their association with racially inferior women and looting, an investigation was launched. The investigator, in the conclusion of his report, proposed arresting Dirlewanger and disbanding his unit. However, the SS and Nazi Party leadership decided otherwise. Dirlewanger, now an SS captain, and his unit were transferred to the east, to Belarus, where they guarded the Mogilev ghetto and simultaneously fought partisans. During World War II, this unit actively participated in many operations against partisan groups and formations. The experience of the poachers and hunters in this punitive unit proved invaluable. The unit's snipers and scouts tracked and ambushed partisans, causing significant problems for the local resistance. After battles, Dirlewanger's unit conducted ruthless punitive operations against the civilian population. According to the investigation, this unit was responsible for burning down more than 180 villages, with the inhabitants partially or entirely exterminated. Typically, the punitive unit would herd the villagers into a local club or stable, douse the walls with kerosene, prop the entrance doors, and set the building on fire. They also used flamethrowers, sometimes leaving the doors unpropped for entertainment. When the villagers, mostly women and children, tried to escape through the doors in panic, the punitive unit would shoot them with machine guns and automatic weapons. Before burning down a village, Dirlewanger's unit might torture those suspected of collaborating with partisans, beating them with their feet, sticks, whips, rifle butts, or piercing them with pitchforks or knives, ensuring the cuts were not too deep. They might also hang people by their legs, arms, or neck. In short, they displayed their sadistic inventiveness. As the number of victims of the most ruthless SS battalion grew, so did the ranks of its commander. In 1941, Dirlewanger was an SS Sturmbannführer, major. In 1942, an SS Obersturmbannführer, lieutenant colonel. And in 1943, an SS Standartenführer, colonel. The Nazi leadership didn't forget about rewarding their hero with honors like the Iron Cross, the Silver Cross, and more. The atmosphere within the battalion was ambiguous. On the one hand, it was a military unit composed of criminals, where a soldier could be beaten with sticks, imprisoned for several days in a cellar pit, depending on location and circumstances, or even killed for misconduct. It was the only military unit in the SS where the commander could shoot a subordinate without a trial. Dirlewanger got away with everything. The methods used by the battalion in fighting partisans and suppressing urban uprisings were brutal. The punitive unit would approach the enemy under the cover of these criminals, allowing Dirlewanger's men to safely engage the opponent. This was a common practice for the SS, who also used this method to check for partisan minds on roads and paths, sending local residents to suspicious areas. If anyone refused, they were shot. In the course of its activities, the Special Punitive Unit executed 1 partisan and 286 accomplices, and 2 partisans and 176 accomplices were shot. In late 1943, the German command had to plug holes wherever they could, and Dirlewanger found himself on the front line, albeit briefly. The punitive unit was effective in fighting partisans and conducting punitive raids, but on the unfamiliar front line, the battalion suffered heavy losses. Within a few weeks of fighting, by January 1944, Dirlewanger had lost half of his unit. The German command was forced to withdraw the battalion from the front and return it to its usual sadistic activities against the local population. Dirlewanger, along with all the rear services, began to retreat westward, leaving a bloody trail behind. On August 1, 1944, the Warsaw Uprising began, and the Special Punitive Unit was transformed into the Dirlewanger Brigade, consisting of about 1,000 soldiers. The brigade included SS and Wehrmacht penal troops, and its strength increased to 2,500. During the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising, Dirlewanger employed his usual methods, taking hostages, using civilians as human shields, executing and shooting prisoners, burning houses with insurgents inside, and setting fire to hospitals with patients, the wounded, and medical staff. For his distinction in suppressing the uprising, Dirlewanger received the Knight's Cross and the rank of Oberfuhrer. After replenishing its ranks with another group of SS and Wehrmacht penal troops and convicts, the unit was sent to Slovakia, where an uprising had also begun. The brigade once again fully justified the trust of the SS High Command, acting as it had in Belarus and Warsaw, taking hostages, provoking, and terrorizing the civilian population. However, the war was nearing its end, and Hitler's Germany was in its final months. On February 14, 1945, the Dirlewanger Brigade was transformed into the 36th SS Grenadier Division in Hungary, where heavy fighting was taking place. The day after the order, Dirlewanger was sent to a hospital in his now division for treatment. He never returned. Fritz Mettes, who had previously commanded the 4th SS Police Division, was appointed acting division commander. The newly formed division, along with the remnants of the defeated German group in Hungary, retreated to Austria. On May 1, 1945, the division commander, the chief executioner himself, was detained by a French patrol in the city of Altshausen. He tried to pass himself off as someone else, but a Jew, a former concentration camp prisoner, recognized Dirlewanger. He was placed in the city prison. Many Poles served in the French army and also worked in the prison guard, and they knew what kind of person they had in their hands. In violation of the regulations, the guards subjected the executioner to daily torture. Dirlewanger's body couldn't withstand the beatings, and after another beating, he died on June 7, 1945.